Dear friends, we are living in a world where a lot of prejudices and bias against people or groups are happening. And why do we prejudice against another group or another person? What makes bias and prejudice in people? It's very important to look into. When we travel around, talk to people, we come to know that there are a lot of prejudices against people or groups or cultures or religion and language, even on regions. In fact, when we look at the reasons for this bias and prejudices, we come to know that this is a complex issue, and deeply bias or prejudices are ingrained in the psychological, social, political, religious, cultural, and historical factors. I try to bring out the possible reasons for biases and prejudices against people and cultures or religions and groups. There are various factors into it. Number one is psychological factors. Number two is social and cultural factors. Number three is historical and systemic factors. Let us look into one by one. The psychological factors. There is a cognitive bias, Cognitive bias means it's a systematic errors in our thinking, perception, and decision making that result from the way our brain process information. This can lead to irrational or inaccurate judgments on people or groups or religions, etc. And they can affect anyone, regardless of their intelligence, education, social status, or experience. There is also another aspect attached to the psychological reasons is fear and threat response. Very often people have fear of the unknown, perceived threats, or past experiences. These can trigger a defensive response, leading to bias and prejudice. There is also another area is group identity and belonging. Human beings, we have a natural desire to belong and identity in a particular group. We want to identify ourselves with a group or a culture or a religion or a group or a nation, which can lead to bias against those perceived as outsiders. So there are psychological factors. The second major factor is social and cultural factors. For example, one's social and upbringing, for socialization and upbringing is a big issue. People are often socialized to adopt certain biases and prejudices from their family, community, or culture. I think it is very important to understand this. Our family background or our community background or cultural background, etc., make us a kind of prejudice or bias against another person or a group. The second factor of social and cultural factor is cultural and historical narratives. Dominant cultural and historical narratives can perpetuate bias and prejudices against certain groups. That's why those who are in power, those who have authority over, they even want to change the history to suit their agenda. So a new narrative is made, so that in that process, a kind of prejudice is created against others. There is also social and cultural factors, one more element, which is power dynamics in social hierarchy. We know society is built upon various structures, some of them are social hierarchy. Even in India, for example, caste hierarchy. Those in positions of power or privilege may perpetuate bias and prejudices to maintain their status. They want to control over. So they keep up their stature, their status, etc. So that in that process they will put or push others aside. The third major area which I mentioned is historical and systemic factors. For example, historical reasons can include historical trauma and oppression. For example, the past experiences of trauma or oppression or marginalization can lead to ongoing biases and prejudices. This can be real or this can be created. For example, in many places we see today, there is the created fear, historical narration of oppression that happened in the past centuries by some other rulers and so on. So they have taken over, they have taken our temples, churches, masjids, gurudwaras, and all sorts of prejudices we create. And then today we want to rectify those mistakes earlier conducted by others, etc. So these kinds of historical oppression or trauma is recreated today. There is also systemic and institutional biases. Biases can be embedded in the institutions, policies, and practices, perpetuating inequality and discrimination. Many institutions, those who have institutional powers, they can easily bias others. For example, when we talk about the past history or past rulers or past people, etc., we say that they're full of mistake in them, etc. No, if we look at the previous rulers, or they were all bad, only we are right. All these aspects are there, perpetuated today in many parts of the world. Another area of historical and systemic factors is lack of exposure and understanding. Limited exposure to diverse perspectives, cultures, and experiences can contribute to bias and prejudices. The more we are excluded, the more we are cut off from others, we do not interact with others, the more chances of prejudices growing in such people. The more we interact, we deal with one another, when we mix up, in our cultures and activities and learn from each other, we learn about others also, prejudices and bias can be reduced. But that is not happening. Now, therefore, in the current context of this prejudice is increasing everywhere. If you look at people in so-called educated people, if you ask them, there will be all sorts of prejudices you'll find, especially organized groups are there today to propagate these prejudices and biases against other people, especially religion and culture, etc. So we need to look at the right-minded people who have sane thinking must come out with certain remedial steps to overcoming these biases and prejudices. So I propose a few things. Number one is education and awareness. And I believe, as an educator, I believe that only through education we can change the mindset of people. In education, there should be an effort made to make a concerted effort about learning different cultures, different histories, and experience can help overcome biases. Such kind of an experiences must be given, and education is the primary source of this change. Overcoming bias and prejudice, education has a big role. Education means, it doesn't mean that you only give a literacy or giving intellectual informations. No, It is also learning about differences of people, different cultures, different histories. And second is empathy and perspective taking. We need to learn and practice empathy and putting oneself in others' shoes and reduce biases. We need to understand the other's perspective. We can always agree to disagree, but try to learn what they are thinking. Each other's perspectives has to be understood. The third area of overcoming bias and prejudice I propose is exposure and interaction. Increased exposure is the only way. Increased exposure to diverse groups and cultures and religions and individuals, races, regions can help break down biases. For example, we are living in a globalized world. I was in Europe for a few years, and I know in we have Indians working there, Africans working there, Latin Americans there. In my own team, we were 11 people then, and from 9 countries. You know, so there are intermingling of what you call cultures and religions and groups and languages, etc., happening much more than earlier because of the globalization and globalized world, etc. So therefore, we need to have exposure about others, other cultures, other regions, other languages. That's the only way to reduce biases. The fourth point I propose is critical thinking and reflection. Encouraging critical thinking and reflection can help individuals recognize challenges, recognize and challenge their own prejudices, their own biases. As religious people, I think in Indian context today, what we need to do, especially in Kerala and other places, in North India and Eastern India, anywhere, is very, very important to learn about other religions. We are living in a multi-religious, multicultural, multilinguistic, and multi-ethnic country where we need to learn about others, especially when it comes to the religion. Today, a religion, we all must learn to respect, to understand, and live in harmony. And harmony occurs only when we learn to live together. And in order to learn to live together, we need to build a mutual understanding. The more we exclude others, the more disharmony is the result. See, the more you just prejudicially you look at a particular religion or a culture or a group of people, the more disharmony is the result. So by understanding the complex factors, and overcoming prejudices and doubts and bias, we can work towards creating a more inclusive, empathetic, and equitable society. And I think this is the need of the hour. If we delay, this will have far-reaching consequences. And I see everywhere there is unimaginable prejudices happening. I hope we will be able to overcome these prejudices and come out with more understanding of others and build a harmonious existence, harmonious living. Thank you, and God bless you all.